if you are a blogger who has never monetized, I took my blog, which was called Dance Track, and I turned it into a magazine, which is probably the farthest that you can take a blog.
Hi, I'm Ebony, and I believe that stories change lives, and everyone has a story worth telling. Sometimes, unfortunately, we let our self-doubt get in the way of us writing our stories and sharing our stories. So that's why I created Motivation to Write as a source of motivation and inspiration to help writers like you and me share our stories with the world. So I talk to the experts ranging from entrepreneurs to marketers to authors to therapists to psychologists who share their knowledge and their advice to help writers like you and me step into our full potential. Dr. Sandra Colton-Medici is a business consultant and educator who helps entrepreneurs create an e-commerce business to live their best life from anywhere. After 30 years in the entertainment industry as a singer, actor, and dancer, Sandra shifted her career into writing, editing, and publishing. After earning a Doctor of Education from USC, Sandra streamlined her focus to online education. Today, she teaches people how to create and launch courses, workshops, webinars, virtual conferences, and membership sites. Dr. Sandra Colton-Medici. Am I saying your last name properly?
It has been said a few different ways. So my husband is French, and so they say it Medici in France, but it is Italian. So it could be said Medici, but here in the States, people just say Medici, but it is what it is.
I'll call you Sandra.
Okay,
Sandra. I'm so happy to have you because you help entrepreneurs, solopreneurs find their passion, navigate digital strategy, make their mark. I like this. Make their mark in education and entertainment, and create an online course or e-commerce business. That's a lot. You have so much experience, and I am excited for you to share with us. And you have a dancing background.
I do.
Yes. I actually, when I was in high school, I started before high school. I think I started when I was 5. I took tap. And then I'm
a tapper too.
Yes.
Yay!
And then I remember I quit like 2 years later, and my mom was like, "You're gonna regret quitting," and I did, because when I got to junior high school, I took dance and just loved it all throughout high school. Joined a dance company, all that stuff. It was just so much fun. Oh my gosh! Like, the power of movement is amazing.
Yeah. Well, and it just, the music connects a lot of people. So even if you can't always speak the same language, you can always, generally find something that connects you as far as musicality. So
yes, and you know what I majored in? Music. I didn't major in dance, I majored in music. So yeah, it all comes together.
I want to apologize first off, because apparently today is gardening day outside. So I've heard a rake and a leaf blower. So I'm hoping that's not too cumbersome on your audio.
Yeah, no worries. I can't hear anything. You're fine.
Okay.
So, but you have an amazing dancing background, professional dancer, and I'm really interested to hear your story. So I'm wondering if you can give us a little background into how you got into this space of helping entrepreneurs find their passions.
Well, so for me, I've always had a writing background. So even in high school, I was writing poetry, and I think my first thing it was like a collection of poems, and I called it Poetry Palette. And I was so excited because at the time I didn't know how to spell palette. Back in the day, I'm like, how do you spell that? But my sister and I grew up dancing, and that was like another outlet. Because we started dancing so young, I was always kind of in the performing arts industry. And, so that's kind of been just a mainstay of what I've done as far as tap, jazz, hip hop. I was a cheerleader at one point. And so when I look at kind of that transition, it really kind of happened because I went to college and I had kind of my backup plan, so to speak. Yeah. I majored in sociology, but I minored in communication studies, and I had a lot of friends who were in journalism. So that kind of was always there as like an outlet. So for me to transition into helping people was another thing that I kind of transitioned along the way, I would say. A lot of times when I would be on a job, every time you're in, some sort of entertainment gig, you have a different boss, right? So you have like a different production company, different director, different choreographer, whatever. And so you're always kind of meeting a lot of people, networking, doing that whole thing. And, I was always trying to do things that were different and challenge myself. And a lot of people that I would meet would say, well, how did you do that? How did you decide to start a blog? Or how did you decide to write a book? Or, what made you start a magazine? And all of those things kind of always came back to my writing from when I was a kid. And then also when I was in my undergraduate study, doing the whole communication studies pathway, which really opened up to not just learning about how to write, but it was learning about PR, it was learning about advertising, learning about research, and really digging into sources and different types of, whether it's a periodical or, like we had to do all of that kind of digging. And so my background in it was expanded from college. Not just, hey, I want to write, but hey, now I know, what kind of writing I want to do, because every single type and style of writing is different, especially like what we see on the internet right now. It's just like a completely different style of writing. So when I was in entertainment, that transition was really more about people asking me, well, how did you do that? And how did you, and so me helping people just kind of felt normal. It just kind of felt like my every day was, being on a job, and they would say, well, what are you doing over there? Because every time we had a downtime, I would either be reading or writing or researching or doing something, editing. I'd be over there with my red pen because I'm a red pen girl. I know a lot of people don't like red pens just because of that, but
it's kind of like a no in teaching now. Like, I
know. Like,
it looks so much like blood.
Yes, it screams off the page. It's like, that's right. It helps me. And so for me, it just kind of was a natural transition progression of helping people because they were asking while I was doing it, into helping people because I saw the gap in the market and knowing that someone needed to fill it. And so that's kind of now where I'm at with, helping people with digital strategy, helping people get their business up and running, or taking it from brick and mortar to online. So that was kind of the transition. But for me, it just kind of felt, natural, something that I was already kind of good at and used to, because, dancers don't always think about what happens after my dance career ends, right? They just think about, I'm young, I'm hot, I'm fiery, I got, I have this motivation and I got talent, right? So they come to LA and they're just like hitting it. And then maybe they have an injury. Maybe there's no jobs, there's a slump in, the market, and they have to think about something else to do, whether, what their other skills and talents are. And what people have forgotten along the way is that when you come to LA or when you go to New York or go to Miami or some of the bigger, hotter cities for performing arts, you are the product, right? You are the commodity. You are pitching yourself. You are selling that talent like nobody else can, right? And so you are a business. And I think that a lot of people don't come with that mindset because there's kind of this divide in the performing arts of you love it and that's why you do it, or you're good at it and you make money from it. And having those blurred lines a lot of the time, can get a little tricky, for someone who's like, but I'm for the arts and I, the love. And then you're like, but I got to pay bills and I got rent, so there's that like weird kind of overlap that people have to negotiate with themselves to really come, finally at the end of the day, when you're not 20, because you may have support at home, you get to that 30 place or that 26-year-old and you're like, I gotta either have another job or I've got to figure out how to monetize this thing and a few other things to get it all into place. Right. And so I've listened to those conversations for so many years from dancers and singers and actors and musicians and backup vocalists and, all these costume designers who've been like, I got to find something else, something that makes sense. And it's really just figuring out how to take what and and just be in your lane as an expert, because a lot of times people think, oh, well, I only know what I know. And I'm like, you know so much more than other people. And it's really about taking that and owning your expertise and going out and being an expert in your field. So if you're a tap dancer, be that tap dancer. If you're a writer, be that writer. And you can say to people, you know, I've published XYZ books, and now I'm going to teach you how I did it. Because there's no shame in knowing things, right? And being so solid in your foundation that you can go out and teach what you know.
So you've said a lot. Like, there's a lot to unpack there.
Sorry, and I know there's a leaf blower going right now. Oh my gosh.
Oh, no worries, because this is so fascinating. Okay, so you mentioned first that a lot of dancers only really think of themselves, and not just dancers, but almost anyone. And then if you're holding any type of job, you think of yourself as a product instead of thinking of yourself as a business. And that's really a mindset shift.
Yeah.
Because when you talk about like be in your lane as an expert and owning your expertise, that really is built on this foundation of just confidence and really kind of embodying and feeling that expertness. And so how do you encourage people? How do you shift mindset with people?
I think sometimes, and this has, you know, I think it kind of pertains to writing as well, getting whatever you know out of your body. And that means if you have to sit with someone and have a conversation and say, you know, tell me what you know. Somebody might be like, I don't know anything, you know, and they're really modest about it. Really, it's about asking yourself targeted questions. What can you tell me about XYZ? How did you find out or figure out how to do XYZ? And really having those specific questions and answering them and saying, okay, well, I studied this for 10 years and I was really, I was really drawn to these mentors or whomever, right? And really having those really in-depth conversations with yourself, or have someone ask you questions and sit down with them and then transpose like, okay, so you talked about this, you talked about this, you talked about this, but you came back to this 7 times. And whatever you come back to, that's where you should start. Because if you've come back to that so many times, then you know way more about that topic, right? If you're an interior designer and someone's asking you about your expertise, but you came back to French country, you know what I mean? Or mid-century mod, like 17 times, then go with that. That's where you lead. You lead with your strong point. You obviously fill in the gaps, obviously, because you want to be strong in all these different topics, but you lead with what you know. And then you can have that expertise build on that foundation. You can say, I'm an expert in interior design and my specialty is mid-century mod. Why? Because I am so drawn to the colors, to the aesthetic, to the textures, to whatever it is that you're going to say. But you have, it's almost like when you, if you get into an interview and you are unprepared, what's your go-to? What can you talk about for 30 minutes nonstop? That's where you're an expert. And then you can build on that to be an expert with, you know, the layers and all of that you can, you know, start painting your own picture. But I think a lot of people forget to have that conversation first, whether it's a writer who's, you know, trying to figure out, should I write a children's novel? Should I write a young adult novel or whatever? Where do you find your lane? What do you enjoy talking about? And I'm forgetting who had the quote, but you know, people who have writer's block, people don't have speaker's block, right?
Yeah.
You can always talk about something. And so when you have that moment of, I don't know, that stuck moment, go and talk to somebody because it will come out. Right?
Yeah.
And whatever it is that you can flow on, you know, as a writer, and you can talk about it, that's where you start next. Because I think a lot of people get stuck and then they get fearful of, well, I can't do this for a living if I'm getting stuck now.
Right.
Oh my gosh, you know, what do I do? And so I think getting things out of your body, especially as an artist, because I feel like writing is an art.
It is.
as much as dance is. And it speaks to people in such a very deep, intimate, emotional level, because they're bringing your words to, to life in their head, right?
Right. Yeah.
And that's something you don't get. You don't get to be in somebody's shower. You know what I mean? Like we don't get to be in that intimate moment unless you are a writer writing those words and bringing and having somebody go, oh my gosh, when they read them,
Right. So, okay, that I love that, because a lot of people, yeah, you're right. When it comes to writing, we get stuck. And I think a lot of times that's also due to things that our teachers have said to us in the past about our writing, or the critiques we've received, where we just feel like, we're just so critical of ourselves as writers. But if we talk about something, then all of the knowledge, all of the stuff in our heads will come forth. What about, because I remember, Sandra, when I started my podcast, I had imposter syndrome. Like, who am I to be even doing this, right? Like, how do you help people overcome imposter syndrome?
And are you talking about just in life or on podcasts? Because I have my podcast, Sweet by Sandra, and I felt a little bit of the same way. And so, and this is somebody, for me, I've been performing for a lot of years. And so having an imposter syndrome, like I have my mic right here, like boom, I got one off of Amazon, and I was like, you know what, I'm just going to do it. And so when I talk to people, especially about performance, and feeling like they don't belong, right? Like, what am I doing here? Yeah. Who's going to listen to me? Right. Really, it is a matter of, you can talk about things that you like, and everybody has an opinion. Now, if you're claiming to be an expert, right, you should probably know a little more than the people you're teaching. Right? Because you can do that. If you are a senior in high school, you could probably teach a fourth grader. Right. If you are a graduate professor, then you can teach undergraduates. So just knowing the structure of it all. Right. If you have an opinion, you can say it. It doesn't matter necessarily what that opinion is. Now, if you're trying to assert something as fact, well, then you should have something to back it up. But I feel like as someone who went through the same thing with podcasting, I'd never done a podcast, never been interviewed on a podcast, but I've always done interviews, right? So I thought, why would anybody listen to me?
Right.
Which is probably the first question. Why would anybody listen to me? And what I tell people is, why not? Right? Mm-hmm. Why not? If you have something to say, then get it off your chest. Mm-hmm. If you feel like that is your vehicle to get, your art form out there, then do it. Because no one else is out there saying what you're saying the way that you're saying it. So your voice is unique. Maybe someone has said, just do it, like Nike, right? But did they say just do it in the way that you said it, with your voice, your inflection, your expression, your emotion? Probably not, because there's only one you. And that's the one thing that people have to remember when they're going through imposter syndrome or something where something's holding you back, is to know that you had that initial idea. And if you don't get it out in 2 or 3 years or even 3 months, someone else will. Right? Someone else will do what you're thinking of doing, or may even have already done it, right? Because there's only so many ideas in the world. But when you are yourself, when you are authentic, when you are telling it like it is, no one can do that like you do it. And so when I went through that moment of, well, why should I do this? No one's going to listen to my podcast. I don't really, do I have an opinion? And I thought, you know what? I'll do one. And we'll see. You know what I mean? Like, what's there to lose? Like, okay, so I have a little fun while I'm doing it, and it's no skin off my back. And, I'll put it out there in the world, and we'll see if somebody listens. And even if it's my mom, well, then she had fun too, right? If you put something out there, you will get better over time, just simply by sheer practice. But you will also, in the example of podcasting, you will get better at what your message is, you will refine whatever it is that is your structure of your programming. You will decide whether it's for you or not. And that's the best thing, is not, if you don't try, then you've already given up and you don't know what will happen. But if you do try and you don't like it, then you're making the decision for yourself not to move forward, instead of just giving up before even trying and having that decision just made. Because I feel like that's one of those things where if you have, at least your foot in the water, you can go, it's warm, I'll try it. But if you never put your foot in the water, then you don't know if it was cold, right? You don't know what you don't know. And that's the one thing that I'm kind of like, it'll kick you later in life, because you're like, I was so close. Like, it's the year of podcasting, or it's the year of whatever for yourself. And if you don't try it, then you won't know. And you'll always be like, I almost did that. Instead of saying, I tried it, I didn't like it. Or I tried it and that was really good. I tried it and people listened, right? And that's the other thing is, I think that there's an audience for everyone.
Right.
There is an audience, and it's true on the internet too. If you look at Instagram and you're like, why are people following that person?
Right. Yeah.
There's an audience for everyone, right? Yeah. Good, positive vibes, and bad, negative too. There's an audience for everyone. And so I feel like if you put yourself out there, there's what they said, I'm forgetting who had the statistic, but there's at least 1 million people like you in the world that will be attracted to what you like, what you say, what you listen to, right? And it's just a matter of having those eyeballs on your stuff.
Right. And there are probably people, as a matter of fact, I'm certain there are people that don't know as much as you do about whatever it is that you're an expert in, and who are doing the thing. Right? Yeah.
Right? Yeah, because I've gotten on to different, different things, whether it's listening to music, and I was like, I could have done that. Like you listen to that song, Friday, and you're like, I could do that. Okay, right? And not to say that there's anything wrong with that song, but she had the wherewithal to be like, I'm going to sing about Friday, right? And she did it, and people were like, that's my jam, it's Friday, or whatever, paycheck time, whatever, like they got it. And then you're kicking yourself because I was going to sing about Friday, right? And so that's the thing, is like knowing that when it's your moment, you take that moment.
Yeah. So I asked that question because I think a lot of times there's this gap with people that have all this knowledge and expertise, but want to move it into a business atmosphere where it's like, I'm really great at what I do, but as far as being an entrepreneur, who am I to be an entrepreneur? I know a lot about XYZ, but to make a business out of that, I think a lot of people suffer from imposter syndrome, just getting into the business part of
the business aspect of it. I think is something you can learn, right? Not everybody is an inventor. I'm not creating light bulbs. I'm not creating the wheel. I'm not, I certainly would have loved to have done Amazon or Facebook or, all of those things. Yeah. But the business side, you can learn. The business side, the fundamentals of, knowing where to find the gap in the market, knowing how to test the product before, having a minimum viable product before you go out there and try to sell it to the masses. That stuff you can learn, and it's really accessible online. I think that the details, what they say, the devil's in the details, right? Where I feel like is my strength is helping people build brands. And what a lot of people did in 2020 is they built digital products. And you can scroll on the internet and you can find a whole bunch of digital products, but you don't find brands behind those digital products. And so a lot of people worked on, how am I going to get through? Like, I need money, I need to make something. And so they made a checklist or a sales funnel or whatever. And so you see those in your feed on Instagram and Facebook and Twitter and all of that. But you don't see their name. You don't know their brand colors. You don't know what they stand for. You don't know their mission, their values, all of that. When you know a brand, you feel an experience with it, right? And so that's where I feel like I serve people best,
Yeah.
is they might have, found an article about how to start a business. That's great. So you know how to maybe set up a URL and get yourself a website. You might have gotten on WordPress or Squarespace or whatever and tried to figure out how to make that happen. Okay, now that's the easy part, I say, most of the time, because there's some step-by-steps that you can follow with tutorials. What is the harder part is knowing how to say what you say in your own voice and have it have a through line all the way across every single platform that you're on. Because a lot of people want to say things at different times and it's a different message, or it's, not necessarily the targeted audience. That's where people need to really pull it in and get really specific on, like, and if you're a writer, you would know this, like, the character. What's the character's background? What do they like to eat? What do they like to do for fun? What kind of music are they listening to when they go to bed? Right? What kind of bubble bath are they putting into their bathtub? What do they like to smell? What do they like to eat? Where do they like to shop? What about shopping? Do they go by themselves, or do they have a partner with them because they need that affirmation when they go in to try on a bathing suit, right? Getting really down to the specifics of who you're trying to talk to. Like, those are really, really important when you're starting a brand or building a business, because if you don't know, you're throwing everything out there, even the chicken soup, right? And hoping that someone's like, oh, I like you. I like that. I need that. And really the message is, it's like if you don't know what you don't know, like we were talking about, then you're just serving up what you think people want instead of serving up what they're asking for, right? And that's like, oh, I want spaghetti and meatballs, but you were giving me green eggs and ham. You know what I mean? Like that doesn't jive, and it's not going to sustain your business. So when you're thinking about starting a business, you start with, fundamentals. You figure out what part is the marketing, you figure out how to make a business plan, you figure out how you're going to get your idea from concept to actual product. You do all of those things, but you don't stop there. You have to figure out how to build that umbrella of what your messaging is and your brand is, because if you don't, then you're like all these people who just started out in 2020 and you're like, buy my sales funnel. And you're like, who are you again? And why should I know you? Why should I like you? And why should I trust you enough with my money to say, okay, here we go, let's try it? Because Target and Walmart and Oprah and Nike and Bill Gates, they have brands. You hear the word Bill Gates or the name Bill Gates and you're like, what is he selling? I need some of that. You know what I mean? Like, if you are thinking about even things that you might not even go to, the Olympics, what are we watching? I know that brand. You know what I mean? Like that, somebody was talking about the US dollar is a brand, right? You trust it because you gotta if you live in the US, right? But you trust it as far as market value. You're looking at how it's influxing and comparing to other things. That's a brand, right? So you have to understand how that experiential and that thought process behind what a brand makes you feel and do and love, beyond just here's my sales funnel.
Right. Okay, so let's talk about how writers, particularly bloggers, can begin to monetize their blog or their writing, because I think this is a lot of what writers are aspiring to. I mean, obviously they're writing books and they're publishing them, but bloggers in particular, they're looking for ways to actually make money via their blog. So come on, Sandra, how can you?
Well, so I've done this a few different ways. So if you are a blogger who has never monetized, I took my blog, which was called Dance Track, and I turned it into a magazine, which is probably the farthest that you can take a blog is to transition it into a magazine. Well, I guess you could probably take a blog and turn it into like a TV show or something like that too. But so what I did is I started a blog. I actually had it on WordPress. This was back in 2009. So it was a while ago. But so I can say this, bloggers now have it good. Because the technical, or I should say the technological, my husband came back in.
Oh, okay.
Hopefully you can edit.
Do we have to talk really low now?
No. So the technological advances of WordPress have been like leaps and bounds with like the plugins. So you guys have it good now if you're blogging. But what happens in the transition from a blog to a blog that pays you really comes down to knowing your niche. Right? Your niche is very important because there's a million bazillion voices out there. And why are people coming to your blog specifically? So content will always reign number one, always.
Right.
The next thing that has to happen with your blog is you have to optimize your SEO. Because if no one is finding your blog, then that doesn't make any sense for you to have one, right? Unless you're doing it for your own enjoyment. And what we're talking about right now is monetization, so that's not the case, right? So SEO is really huge, and you can find some really great details about SEO on neilpatel.com. He's really good at breaking it down and giving you a lot of free information too. One of the things that he says that I have done recently is having a sidebar on your blog that has must-read articles or must-read categories, and that really is not just your name for the categories. You're not going to put on business or lifestyle or whatever. You're going to use keywords in that sidebar that come up on every single blog post, like online classes or whatever it is that are your keywords for your particular blog.
Yeah.
You put those words into the sidebar, not your categories, and have it listed as must-read articles or something like that, so that every single time a blog post comes up, it's seeing those when, in the Google search, right? That's one that I actually added to mine because I was like, why would I not? Right. Why would I not? I was always taught, put the categories there, and categories, lifestyle, it means nothing. I mean, it's not specific. It's not going to get you Kawasaki engines or whatever. Like, it's not going to get that for you because it just doesn't say that to the technology. So that's one. I should say that's number two. The next part is understanding the difference between sponsors, because that's one way to get monetization is sponsored content, and affiliates, and having affiliates on your blog, and then also knowing how to distinguish if your blog is a paid blog versus you putting your content there. So paid blog, like there are paid blog networks, PBNs, that a lot of people use in their blogging systems, which means you're asking people to give you content and they're going to pay you to do that. So that's one way to have good content if you're doing good editing, but having money coming in because they're paying you. The issue with that is you're giving something in return, which would be backlinks for these people who are paying for their content to be on your site. So do follow, no follow. I would ask you to look it up because we could go into that all day. But knowing that you're most likely going to put a link to someone else's content if you're going to have a paid blogging network. That's one thing. Affiliates is another thing because there are tons of different affiliate networks that you can be a part of. Rakuten has one. Commission Junction is another one where you can get on there, be a publisher, and you can say, okay, well, I want to be affiliated with all of these different companies, GoDaddy or fashion like Macy's or Nordstrom or whatever. And they will tell you based on your content on your site, your page views, if you're right for them, if you guys fit and you jive as far as what your content is and what their audience is that they're trying to go for. Then you would go into these different networks and you would pull their ads, right? You would pull their offers, and you would either just have them on your site as just a straight up static ad, or you would integrate that into an article. What I would say to anyone who's blogging is your voice is super important And if you are just putting up ads, I might look at them. People might look at them. People probably won't look at them. But if you're telling someone, I love this product, this is how much I use it, this is why you should love it, here's the link, that's different, because they know you and they trust you. So you're giving them advice on different products, and then you're happening to know the people who make them. And the difference now between way back then is when you use affiliates and you are saying this is a link to an affiliate, you are now having to tell everyone this is a link to an affiliate. So the Federal Trade Commission is not allowing you to just slide that little link in without anyone's knowledge, right? So you are being super upfront saying, this is what it is, this is how I know it, this is why you should like it. And by the way, I'm also going to get paid a very small commission for this. So that's another thing. The sponsored content is where I think most people should go. The reason why I say this is because you're creating custom content and you're building relationships with different advertisers and different brands, and that relationship could last for a long time. I feel like affiliate marketing with that on a blog is kind of really, really fast and furious and not as lasting as far as building that kind of relationship. When you are doing the sponsor content, you're putting work in. You might put together a 500 to 800 word blog piece. You might take photos. You might, go shop for the item and do a little video. You might, do something specific for Instagram or Twitter or Facebook or something like that. It's a thing, right? And I think that those where you give a lot of value, that's where a lot of people are like, oh, let me read this, let me share it, let me like it, let me comment on it. And that's the engagement that you really want to build that kind of audience appreciation for what you do, but also that they're going to pass that information on so that then other people see it, it gets into the algorithm, more people see it, more people click on it, hopefully more people buy it, and then you're getting commission from that. So those are three different areas. The other thing that when I was doing my blog, you can do all of those things, but then the transition that I made into taking it from a blog into a magazine is knowing that really a blog, if you talk about more than one thing is it becomes a magazine anyway. Mm-hmm. It just isn't a physical magazine yet. And that means that most people have categories. When you think of magazines, they're really departments. Right. Categories are departments. When you think about your title, you might say, I'm a blogger. Really, you're an editor, right? And you are curating the amount of content that you're putting into it. So it's just, part of it is mindset and saying, okay, well, I'm really going to be an editor. Right. of this journalism. And then I'm going to, instead of just, I'm a blogger and I'm just going to throw up, whatever. Really, and not that bloggers think that way, but sometimes people think that a blog is not as important as a published piece of anything, right? But I do think that blogging is really important because it's really on the pulse, right, of what's happening. Whereas magazines are doing things 3 or 4 months in advance, maybe even 6 months in advance. And so they're forecasting the future versus somebody who's posting a blog like on the fly. This is the here and now, right?
Yeah.
So go ahead.
So for the blog to magazine, mm-hmm. Is that a physical magazine or is that a digital magazine? And how do you make money from that?
So when I did it, I ended it in 2013, but it went for 5 years. So when I did the transition to the magazine, it became a physical publication. It also had a digital arm to it. So it was distributed in the US and in Canada in actual physical locations, Barnes & Noble, I think Barnes & Noble was open then. Oh my God. Oh, it's been so long. Borders, that's who closed, right? Borders, it was in Borders. It was on different, magazines, stands, everywhere I would travel, I would go and get a copy. And it was called Dance Track Magazine. I actually, as far as monetization of that, it's the same kind of idea, except for when you're thinking of sponsors, you are looking at your numbers ahead of time, like your readership. You're getting all of those statistics together because you're putting together your editorial calendar, and you're sending it out and pitching it to different people that you think would, have people interested in your content. Right. So getting sponsors, meaning paid ads inside of your publication, that's where you would make money. The other is,
I have to ask you, because like a magazine, were you doing all that writing by yourself, or did you have people helping you?
I had freelance writers.
Okay.
Yeah.
I was thinking, wow, she's a super writer, because that's a lot of
it's a lot of content, but when you have organization and we pre-plan a lot of things, it's easier to say, okay, well, this person's going to be writing about Dancing with the Stars, and this person's going to be writing about traveling, and all these different things. So but freelancing is good because there's a lot of people who don't necessarily want to write for one place, and so there are freelance writers out there who want to just do one-off pieces every once in a while. So that was really good. And then I also made it a point to have interns so that they learned along the way what it takes to put a magazine together, because there's a lot of people who might be in different universities and colleges who are part of their magazine staff, but it's very regimented. And I think it helps you do certain things certain ways, but when you work for different publications, you see how other people do things. And I think that was really important too for different students to see that, yes, terminology is the same, but location scouting and, being behind the scenes for a photo shoot, like that is something that you don't always get when you're writing for a publication that doesn't do that, right? So you might not have that experience if you're working for a publication talking about technology, right? You might be talking about the tech, and you might be getting, an inside peek to Microsoft's next software. But we were doing fashion and dance, and, people were able to go to behind the scenes of, So You Think You Can Dance, and, like doing that kind of thing to give them a different perspective of, okay, well, this is the article we're going to write. This is what you're going to see, and this is why it's important, because they got to meet people and, do things like that. So, yeah. So
if someone, so let's say, what about digital magazines, or should that even be a thing if you're a blogger? Because as you said before, your blog is kind of like a magazine in and of itself.
I think that you have to decide if you're, because magazines have digital publications. So if you're Vogue or if you're Mary Claire or whatever, you have digital versions of your magazine right now. And so the difference though is that there are special sections, I think, in digital publications, like you get the meat and potatoes, like who's on the cover in your digital and your and your physical copy. But you have special things that I think that what I was doing is I was adding different special articles that were in the digital publication so that people would want to buy that copy too. So that you weren't like, some people would say, you could get it with your subscription. Okay, well, I only want the physical subscription. And then, for $1 more, you could get the digital so that you're getting all of the articles. I think that subscriptions, obviously, that's another way to make money. But if you're a blogger and you want to do a digital publication, I would say that your content needs to not just be what's in your blog right now, but it has to be curated and special for that publication. So maybe you're a blogger and once a year you do an annual review or my favorite things like Oprah, or you do something that's really special. Maybe you take some of the basis of articles that you've already written and you revamp and, to make it be like, okay, so every week I've talked about my top 10 songs. Well, in the published, magazine, digital or otherwise, this is my top 10 of the year, so that you can say, and this is why, and this is what readers have said about it, and this is the visual that goes with it or whatever, so that you make it special instead of it just being a regurgitated version of what you've already written. I think that that's really important. But you also have to know who's going to buy it, right? You want to know, like, if people have subscribed or seen your RSS feed or something like that, and you're seeing it every day and it's free, why would people want to buy this new thing that you're putting out there that's a digital version of what you've already done? I think that that's where research comes in, and that's where you take the pulse of your audience and you say, okay, well, if I did this, what would you want to see in it? If I did this, how much would you pay for it? If I did this, how often would you want something to come out like that? So that you have the research to back up the reason to put it out. Right. Because if you don't test it and you don't know, then you'll put it out and it'll go, right? And who wants to put all that work in without, getting some rewards?
Exactly. I once heard someone say, how did they say this? Like, don't make any product that people don't want. Like, know that people want it first before you make it.
Well, you have to have that minimum viable product in, know that it's been validated. You have that proof that it will sell because you've already done it, and then move forward. So, like, for me, I look at Dance Track magazine as being like, whoa, I know it's sold because I printed the copies. We shipped them, we drop shipped them to the distributors. The distributors in Canada and US got it to the actual places. They actually stocked to the shelves, and they actually sold. That's, validated proof. And then I went on to, you were talking about how do you monetize? Well, you can do things like, for me, I pitched it to Dance Moms, and I ended up taking the magazine and getting it on Dance Moms, doing a photo shoot, having a cover star, and that sells, like you're talking about, how do you sell it? Okay, well, getting more eyeballs on your publication or your blog, that either gets you views on your website or sells magazines.
Right. Okay, so then let's I can't believe we're running out of time, but let's talk about marketing. So you have the blog or the magazine or whatever. You have the thing. How do you market it?
Well, so you need to, number one, go to where your people live, right? So if your people are living on Facebook, if they're living on Instagram, Snapchat, Twitter, wherever it is, you need to know exactly where they live. And that's where you would probably start as far as the marketing efforts. I always look at marketing as, you've already done that background research, so you know what you are looking for, but you have to test. And that's where the advertising and the testing and, A and B testing comes in, is, you're not just, pushing your content like, this is a great article, read it, like it, please, you don't want to
usually work.
You don't want to sound desperate, right? But you do need to test headlines, like something that might have worked with your warm audience on your website might not attract new people without a great headline, right? So you need to test your headlines, test your subtitles, really establish yourself doing, whether it's being on podcasts, being interviewed in other magazines. Another thing that I think is a way to get your information out is by guest blogging. And so that's another way to get your byline out there, to get your links in other people's places. And that's, we talked about PBNs earlier. You don't always have to do it and pay for it. There's plenty of places that you can find guest blogs that are looking for great content and will accept your submission. And if you want to, speaking of, I actually have a Facebook group. It's called, if you go to Facebook groups and you just put in WA guest blogging, I have a Facebook group. It has 13,000 people in it. And all of those people are bloggers, and they're looking to guest blog, and people post their opportunities to do free guest blog posts. So if you're looking for like that community, you can certainly search it, and it's a free community to be in. So
that's great.
Yeah,
that's great. Okay, so can we close out with Clubhouse? What is Clubhouse? How can we use it? Give us all
So
those.
Clubhouse is social audio. And what that means is, and there's a lot of things like this. So if you are on if you're trying to get on Clubhouse, that is one thing. But I'm going to give you kind of a lot of different outlets. When you're on Clubhouse, you need an invitation to get in. It's only on iOS right now. So if you have Apple or if you have an iPhone, they are working on Android. What it is you're getting into different rooms in this clubhouse, so to speak, and people are just starting conversations. It is audio only, which a lot of people love because you don't have to get dressed up to have a conversation. You could probably do dishes while you're listening. But there are different roles. You can be a host, which is someone who starts a room. You can be a moderator, someone who's actually facilitating the room, meaning when people start the conversation, they're kind of giving people the guidelines of what the conversation is about, if they're going to allow guest speakers, how to raise your hand, how to mute your mic, all of these different things. That's kind of what a moderator is there to facilitate the conversation. There's just a listening portion if you just want to come in and listen. So there's a lot of different places to be: the host, the moderator, the speaker, or the listener. You can leave quietly so that no one is like, oh, hey, you don't have to announce that you're leaving. But you basically set up your profile like any other social network, where you have your profile photo, your links to either Twitter or Instagram, and you participate if you want to. And you don't have to participate if you don't want to. You can just pop into a room and listen. That's social audio in a nutshell. What has kind of, I think Clubhouse has the new and shiny thing going for it right now, because 2020 was kind of this oh my gosh, what just happened? And people needed to feel connected, and it came along at the right time. And so people gravitated toward it. A lot of rooms that I see right now have kind of gravitated toward the business side of things, where a lot of industry experts are lending their voices. There's a lot of marketing rooms, like how to build your following on social media, how to 10x your business sales. But there are other rooms where people play music. There's people who have had auditions. I've listened to people do callbacks for The Wiz, just random rooms that you will find on there. You can start a club. If you want to join my club, it is called College of Style, which is also something that I am launching in May. And it's basically to help people build brands and to really figure out all those details that you need to really make a point, make your voice heard, have a consistency with your brand. And that's my club. So you can create your own club on Clubhouse as well, and start your own rooms. That the difference between just being in Clubhouse and starting a club is that if you're in the club, you can be notified every single time the club starts a room. So that's interesting. But there are other avenues as well. And I've been on Twitter Spaces. I'm a beta tester for Twitter Spaces, which is similar to Clubhouse. There's a few different features on there that they're testing out right now, like transcription. So for people who are deaf or hard of hearing, you can read the transcription as the audio is going. Yeah. I just actually did a conversation on something called Quilt, which is a new social audio as well. But it's for self-care, and it's a woman-led company. And really the conversations are completely different on Quilt, about meditation, supporting women businesses. I mean, the conversations are definitely a little more supportive instead of salesy, I think, on that particular social network. There's Discord. There's a lot of different social audio that I think is happening right now. And apparently Facebook is going to get into the mix with their own version of it. Of course. And then I'm also a beta tester for something called Fireside, which is It's the new, it's kind of like a hybrid of Clubhouse and live podcasting. And so it's Mark Cuban's new app. If you know him from the Mavericks, the Dallas Mavericks, I'm a beta tester for
I
that.
know him from Sharks.
Oh, from Shark Tank, right?
Yes.
Yeah, so he's kind of getting in the mix in a different way. If you are into podcasting, or if you are a writer who, I've heard different authors on there as well, talking about their books, talking about character arcs, things like that. It's definitely a more intimate style of social audio where, you know, you're allowed to clap for people. It's just very interesting.
That's cool. Oh my gosh. How exciting. Thank you for that, like, how do you say, mini course, like an intro Clubhouse 101. That was great. So tell us, because we're out of time, but tell us where we can find you and all that good stuff.
Yeah, so thank you for definitely listening to all of what I had to say. And if you're an author or a writer, or, you know, you're into the performing arts, you can always find me either on my website, which is sandracoltonmedici.com, or you can also go over to collegeofstyle.com, which is where a lot of my content is going to start popping up in May, because that's when my new membership starts.
Oh, how exciting. How exciting. Okay. Thank you so much, Sandra. This was wonderful.
Weren't those wonderful ideas that Sandra shared with us on how to monetize your blog? I love the short 101 course on Clubhouse. There's just so many different ways to be creative with your art, with your words, with whatever it is that you're creating. So I hope that you do check out her website and her podcast and all that she has to offer. And also check out my social media. You can follow me on Twitter at Ebony Haywood, and you can follow me on Instagram and Facebook at Motivation to Write. And you can sign up for my weekly newsletter at zazo.com. Thank you so much for joining me this week. And I look forward to next week when I have a conversation with author Alan Klein. So please tune in for that. Have a wonderful weekend. Bye-bye.